Welcome, everybody. Little different video for you today. I know normally when I do these, it's for the P3 class, but today we're making a video for to help U.S. history students. I'm giving some background on the 1920s workers' unrest and the Russian Revolution. So for today, for this video, we'll be putting aside P3 a little bit and focusing in on some U.S. history. So I guess that means that if you're in P3, you can still watch the video and enjoy it, but this is definitely for U.S. history classes. All right, so here we go. What we're locking in on right now is, this is all background information about workers' unrest and general unrest after World War I, 1919 to 1920. And it was you could say it was the worst, one of the worst, if not the worst economic times in U.S. history. And the reason I say that is because as World War I ended, price controls were dropped and inflation skyrocketed. Inflation, the general increase in prices, which reduces buying power of the average citizen, skyrocketed. And I want to read some numbers to you just to make the point. Now, 36 months, 1918 to 1920. In those 36 months, 7 months had 20% inflation rates. 20% inflation rates. Only 5 months in those 3 years had an inflation rate of less than 13%. Now, obviously, those numbers don't mean much to you because context always matters. I mean, what does that mean? 20% inflation. What's going on with that? Here's your context. At no other time in U.S. history have we ever seen 1 month with 20% inflation increase. From 1918 to 1920, 5 months. It is a unique economic crisis in U.S. history. That 20% mark has not been hit since. Moreover, the idea that it was in the teens so many times during that time period we're talking about, 1918 to 1920, is also largely unprecedented. From 1946 to 1947, you have 8 months between 13 and 19%. And that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. And then another worst moment in U.S. history, 1979 through 1980, you had 8 months between 13 and 15% inflation. Those are the other two worst inflation periods in U.S. history. And once again, none of them hit 20% once. So the average citizen was getting crushed by inflation and their buying power dropping so low. And when you have trouble putting food on the table, when you have trouble keeping the lights on, when you have trouble affording your house, that creates fear and anger in people. When you're afraid of what the next day holds in terms of those very basic needs, you're looking at a population that is ripe to take action. And action they do take. In 1919, you have a massive number of worker strikes and labor unrest. 4 million workers participated in strikes during the year 1919. 4 million. Using census information, we know that there were 20 million eligible people working in the workforce at that time. So we're talking 1/5 of all workers engaged in strikes during that 1 year. And they were all over the country. Once again, I'm going to read you a list. We have the general strike in Seattle, where 65,000 people went on strike. The Boston police strike of 1919. The harbor workers in New York, 15,000 harbor workers went on strike. 365,000 steel workers went on strike from 1919 to 1920. 120,000 textile employees in New England on strike in 1919. So strikes were popping up all over the country. People are afraid. People are scared if they can take care of their families, not sure what they can afford. And the situation doesn't seem to be getting better once again, because when you got 1916, 1917, 1918, 1919, 1920, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And once again, I don't want to belabor the point, but you're hitting that 20% inflation rate that has never occurred since this time. So people were dealing with something that was truly unique and devastating to their lives. And because of this, workers went on strike. What are they striking for? Very basic things. Very, very bread and butter type of issues. Higher wages, of course. And make sure I got it right. They were looking for the 8-hour workday. They were looking to work, hey, can we only work 8 hours a day? So not exactly what we would call mind-boggling requests, an 8-hour workday and better wages, but that's what two of the bread and butter issues that they were fighting for. Now, with all this going on, you also have the Russian Revolution that took place in 1917. And the Russian Revolution creates chaos in Eastern Europe and Russia, but a certain level of dread in the rest of the world, in that the Russian Revolution does introduce a different way of looking at a nation's economy to the world. In that regard, it is revolutionary. A new way of running an economy is brought into existence. Now, the Russian Revolution also causes tremendous confusion in this way. The revolution takes place in 1917. Vladimir Lenin leads the revolution. Vladimir Lenin wants to bring socialism to Russia. He'll be in charge. Now, just stick with me. Socialism is part of the philosophic concept introduced by a fellow named Karl Marx. It's laid out most clearly in his 1848 book, The Communist Manifesto. Communism is part of the progression of socialism. Socialism progresses through stages: state socialism, utopian socialism, communism. That's Karl Marx's vision now, all right? Socialism, for Karl Marx, it can be summed up in the simple phrase that he used: workers of the world unite. He believed workers were taken advantage of all across the country. All across the country. Hell, what am I saying? All across the world. Workers of the world unite. A person in England who's in the working class, and a person in America in the working class, and a person in Germany in the working class have more in common with each other than they do with the wealthy in their own countries. So it's not about your nation, it's about your class for Karl Marx. Workers of the world unite, create a system where workers are getting the benefits they deserve, and slowly progress to this concept of communism. Where things get murky with Lenin is this: Lenin leads the Russian Revolution, overthrows the Tsar, wins, but he's a totalitarian leader. He's a dictatorship in his mind. He does create state socialism. Now, in state socialism, the government owns all means of production and all the resources, and then they are supposed to distribute the wealth around, slowly get people used to it, and then release the reins to the community. Communism, community. What happens with Lenin and then with his successor Stalin is there's tremendous wealth and power in the hands of the government under state socialism, and they don't give it up. They just hold it. So what you have in this new country, the Soviet Union, the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, is this. You have state socialism controlled by a dictator who allows one political party in this country. And that political party is called the Communist Party. And now communism becomes merged with dictatorship. And on some level, it's part of the flaw is in Karl Marx's theory. This is not a philosophy class. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but Karl Marx drops the ball in his philosophic thinking about human nature, which results in a Lenin and a Stalin. To a degree. The important thing here is state socialism economic plan, dictatorship, Communist Party merged to create a vision of what communism is. And obviously, it's not, you don't want dictators in your country. You don't want people to think that way in your country. So, socialism, communism is wrapped up in a new, but also a bit frightening because of the dictatorship, totalitarian bent of the only communist country in the world. So that's what you get. But because Karl Marx's philosophy is about workers, this drives what's called the Red Scare. The fear that all this worker unrest isn't because of fair wages and hourly and hours at work. No. This is that foreign idea coming into the country, this communist idea about the importance of the worker coming into the country, un-American, it's unknown, and it's a problem. And so you end up with this idea of the Red Scare, where politicians and business leaders are on the lookout for communist infestation of workers, unions, and things of that nature. Now, because of the Red Scare, we now get backlash against immigrants. But part of that backlash against immigrants is also because of violence during the time period. There was an Italian anarchist whose name I'm probably going to mispronounce, Luigi Galliani. And he inspired a group known as the Gallianists. And they had bombing plots. Once again, just to give you an example, we're not talking 2 or 3 bombs here. They had the April bombings in 1919, where 36 bombs were mailed to different politicians and business leaders in an attempt to kill them. Then, in June of 1919, in a rather sophisticated plot, they managed to pull off 9 bombings in 8 cities on the same night in an attempt to kill and disrupt certain politicians and business leaders. Obviously, this is not a good look. The leader of the group, Luigi Galliani, is Italian. So Italian immigrants become targeted for being anarchists because of this. Also, in both of those bombing attempts, one fella, Palmer, was a target in both of them. And this leads him to launch the Palmer raids. He's an attorney general, so he's a high-ranking political figure. Now, the Palmer raids take place from November of 1919 through January of 2020, after the 2 bombing attacks took place, both of them targeted at Palmer personally and other powerful people in the country. So they want to clean that up. Italian immigrants get targeted in their raids because of the connection to the Italian group and their anarchist ways. But you also target Eastern Europeans who are coming into the country. And you're targeting the Eastern Europeans because, well, where's communism coming from? Where's socialism coming from? Eastern Europe, this new Soviet Union, this country that didn't exist 5 years ago suddenly exists, and they're changing the way things look and the way they want to do things. By the way, just to keep things accurate, Vladimir Lenin, as part of his Russian Revolution, does kill upwards of 7 million people in his revolutionary purge of the old ways, which is always part of the revolutionary process. So there's a lot to look at, though. You don't want that here. You don't want that here. Now, so you target Eastern Europeans, and you target Jewish immigrants as well, many of them also from Eastern Europe. Many of them fleeing the Russian Revolution. In fact, as just a side note, my family, my mother's side of the family, is in this country because of the Russian Revolution. They fled. They fled Poland because of the Russian Revolution. I had a great uncle great uncle. Not like I know he was a great guy too, but he's a great uncle and a great uncle who fled Poland with his family because he fought against the Red Russians, the Bolsheviks, in the Russian Revolution. And when his side lost, it was time to get out of Dodge. And evidently getting out of Dodge meant fleeing across the ocean and landing, I believe it was Franklin, Connecticut. Good place to hide, I guess, from the communists. I'm sure he was not the only Eastern European immigrant who came to the United States, not to carry communism with him, but to flee the hatchet, if you will, that Lenin was dropping on all his opponents. So, a little piece of personal history thrown in there. But also something that happened that made American workers support the anti-immigration attacks of the Palmer raids was this. You have all these people going on strike. I must gotta go back to the beginning now, and I was all getting interrelated. You had all these people on strike, and these immigrants are coming over with nothing, and so they become they cross the picket lines. They become what we would call nowadays scab workers. You hire them because your regular employees aren't working. So they're crossing the picket line and keeping the business running while we're fighting for our rights as workers. So a lot of your blue-collar workers get very angry about this because these immigrants are coming in and they're hurting our ability to win these strikes because they're allowing the factories or the different companies or the textile mills to stay open. And that just feeds into the frenzy where we can turn the workers against these other workers. Karl Marx would be miserable about that because he would be saying, workers of the world unite, and there's separation taking place. And so there was an anti-immigrant feel that also became part of this time period, both from the fear of communism, the disruption of the efforts to strike, and it's not too hard to paint a picture and propagandize a group of people when you can show the facts that some of them, the Italians, are in fact mailing bombs to people and trying to kill people and are anarchists. So this just ramps up some of the anti-immigrant feelings in the country. As you can see from what I just laid out, these are pretty disruptive times with a lot going on. And these three different factors, the workers' unrest, which is caused by the inflation, along with the Russian Revolution, which helps create that Red Scare, and then the anti-immigrant atmosphere of the times, created for some very tumultuous times for the country and for individuals just trying to get food on the table. So I guess I'll end with this. The good old days weren't always good. And tomorrow, hell, maybe tomorrow isn't quite as bad as it seems. Now, I wish I could take credit for that thought, but here's a little P3 for you. I don't make any of these videos without a little bonus question. That thought I just shared with you, the good old days weren't always good and tomorrow's not as bad as it seems, is from a song. It's from a song, so I can't take credit for that line. But what I can do is offer you 5 bonus points on your assignment. 5 bonus points on your assignment if you do a little side research, because it's important to name your sources. What's the name of the song? The name of the singer, the album, and the year of release of that song. Get yourself 5 bonus points. And practice your citation skills at the same time. How about that? We help in so many ways here on the P3 station. All right. Well, that's enough. And hopefully this helps give you a nice foundation for your assignment. And I'll see you next time. Be well, everybody. Take care.